What's up YouTube? I want to do a quick tutorial today, just a helpful video to help some people out on how to cure ick. I just want to make it quick and simple. Alright, so the first thing you have to know is, and by the way, I'm just showing some goldfish here that are actually getting treated for ick. And if you could see, there's some bloodworms. I just gave them a treat. I threw some bloodworms in the tank, but alright, anyways. The first thing you need to know about ick are, it's very common in fancy goldfish like I have here, but almost any fish can catch ick. And you need to understand that ick is a parasite, and it wants to attach to your fish and literally eat your fish and feast off of your fish and harm your fish and eventually kill it. So when you first spot ick on a fish, you're usually going to see white spots on the fins. The fins are the softest tissue, so it's easiest for the ick parasite to attach to the fins, and then eventually it likes to go to the mouth and gills, where it'll eventually suffocate and kill your fish. So what you need to understand too is there's ways you can prevent getting ick, and there's ways that you can treat ick. Now, to prevent getting ick, you need to understand that when fish are very stressed out or sick, they're very susceptible to getting ick, and that's often when you'll see your fish get ick. A lot of times if you're buying new fish from a pet store and the pet store doesn't take good care of their fish, or they have some sick fish in the tank, you'll bring the fish home and you'll notice it has ick. Or a lot of times you'll see the fish in the store have ick. So when you're buying fish, you definitely want to avoid fish that have ick, and you definitely don't want to buy from a tank of fish that has other fish that have ick, because that means that even though you might not see it yet, your fish may be infected. It's also important to understand that wild caught fish are pretty dangerous to have in your aquarium, just because they're more likely to have parasites and different things. So if you're cutting wild caught fish, you definitely want to quarantine them, and it's good to quarantine all fish before you add them to your main tank, which is just kind of a side tank where you right when you buy the fish, you put it in there and you observe it for a while until you find out that it's healthy, and then you can add it with your other fish. Now, you know good ways to prevent getting ick. It's important to avoid fish that have ick, and it's important to quarantine your fish when you get them, and it's important to also acclimate them to the water. You never want to shock fish by putting them in cold water and then hot water, or hot water to cold water, because that stresses them out, and then that can lead to them getting ick. Just like for humans, when you're stressed out and if you're not eating healthy and you just don't take care of yourself, you're more likely to get sick. So keep that in mind. Now, if you do end up with fish that gets the ick parasite, which is possible, you need to understand that the parasite starts on like the ground, the substrate. It's going to start in the gravel, and then eventually it becomes free swimming, and then it'll attach to your fish, and that's where, once it attaches to your fish, it'll eventually kill them if left untreated. Now, if you spot ick right away and it's not that severe, what you can do is raise the temperature in your fish tank. It's also important to understand how much heat your fish can tolerate. For example, goldfish can't tolerate much heat. They're cold water fish, but certain fish like plecos, discus, most cichlids could tolerate pretty warm water, getting close to about 90 degrees. So keep that in mind. But when treating the ick parasite, you always want to raise the water in your tank, the temperature, to about 83 degrees or warmer. Right now I have it set to 83 for these goldfish, because any warmer than that can have bad side effects on them. And it's also important to know that when you raise the temperature in the water, you're also lowering the oxygen levels. So it's important to understand that and make sure your water is well oxygenated so your fish can breathe properly and get enough oxygen. And while you're always raising the temperature for ick, if you notice it's not that severe and it's just starting, like I said, you can add salt. There's aquarium salt you can add to your tank, and if you use proper dosages, that can sometimes kill off the ick parasite. And it's also important to mention that the purpose of raising the temperature is to speed up the life cycle of ick, and hopefully make it die faster. That's the goal, and stop it from reproducing. So you can do that. You can treat them with salt. You could take the fish out of the tank and place them in a salt bath. You could look that up so you could see how much salt you need and stuff. Depends on the fish, and keep them in there for about 10-15 minutes and then add them back to the aquarium. That can be useful. But the best thing to do, and this is usually when if you notice your fish has later stages of ick and it's pretty bad, you're going to want to use medicine. You could pick up ick medicine online or from a store, and it's usually pretty cheap. You can get a small bottle for only a couple bucks, and usually you'll do something like 3 drops per 2 gallons, and you add that at least once a day. You can even do twice a day, and every time you add medicine you want to take about 1/4 to 1/3 of the water out of the tank and then add clean water before you add the medicine. It's also important to mention that you should not have carbon in your filter when using ick medicine, because the carbon in the filter can actually pretty much just destroy the medicine. So you want to take carbon out of your filter. And while kind of lost my train of thought. Yeah, so you can use salt baths or you can use the medicine. And usually when you're treating them with the medicine, usually treat them for about a couple days to a week. And like I mentioned, turning the temperature up in the tank speeds up the process and hopefully gets rid of ick sooner. That's the goal. So, and if left untreated, ick will almost always result in your fish dying. So it's important to treat it, and if you treat it properly and follow the simple steps that I gave you, you should be able to save your fish. And take the preventative measures to make sure that you don't buy fish with ick, or can at least try to avoid it. Sometimes it's not always possible, but you want to avoid getting fish with ick, and you want to quarantine them and follow everything else I mentioned. Well, that's about it. Thanks for watching, and now you know something new.